So, Masjid Uthman, one very important component of our vision is the education of our children. As we all understand, education is a foundation of our future generations. And so, education has always been very important. Back in 2017, we started our first educational program, which is our Maktab, our after school Islamic studies program, our HIS program. And this was the need of the time. There were students who they were going to schools, even possibly sometimes Muslim schools, but in terms of their Quran skills, in terms of their Islamic studies, there was some weakness there. So this program addressed that immediate gap. Alhamdulillah, over time, we developed that program. We actually researched it quite a bit, traveled abroad, and looked at different systems. And alhamdulillah, that program over time grew quite a bit to the point where I think about a year ago, our enrollment was more than 600 students throughout our program. In fact, I believe that our HIS program is probably one of the largest programs, not just in Chicago, but probably in the country. We have about 170 full-time HIS students. There's a part-time HIS program. There's an after-school HIS program as well. This is something that we focused on as an immediate need. Now, when we think of education, and the whole concept of Sirat School is that education is holistic. So, a student, when they come through, when they first start their education, of course, the dini component is very important for them to learn the alif bata, to be able to read the Quran. But of course, we want our kids to be part of modern society, to operate in modern society. So we expect them to also to receive an education in English and math and science, and of course, give them the opportunity to be in any profession they want to be. So how do we bring all that together? Because our vision is that education is holistic. So a student that is being educated in English and math, that English and math and science and social studies should be aligned with our Islamic values. In addition to that, just as students learn a certain level in English and math, so it's not enough to learn 1 plus 1. By the end of high school, students are learning algebra and calculus. It's a fairly advanced course of study in all of these subjects. So why are we satisfied with our students only learning alif bata, how to read the Quran, and some very basics of how to perform the salat? Just as they're learning a very advanced level of study in the empirical subjects, they should also be able to understand the basis of their dini subjects as well. So to be able to read the Quran in the Arabic language, to be able to access the works of our scholars in the Arabic language, to understand how fiqh came about, what are the principles of tafsir, what are the principles of hadith, at least at a basic or intermediate level. Every educated Muslim, just as they're educated in history and social sciences and science, they should have an equivalent level of education. And by having a community and an ummah that has that level of education, our capacity as a community will just become that much larger. Because in whichever field of endeavor we're in, we can bring our deen. And not only that, but we can lead society, we can lead civilization. So this is the goal of the vision of our program. And this is something we've been thinking about for many years. So you'll see here that in 2021, we actually created like our first draft of this. And we approached some of the Muslim schools. At that time, we were much smaller. And we approached several Muslim schools to work on this jointly. But then COVID came, things just didn't work out. And in the meantime, as we grew, we realized that we have a need for our own facility. So last year, we purchased this facility. And alhamdulillah, now we're actually able to offer this vision and this program on our own. So introducing you to the team that's come up with the curriculum and the philosophy that we'll be presenting shortly, inshallah. One important point, and I'll try to be brief, but the important thing that I want to point out is that, mashallah, the team has an educational background in both the dini sciences as well as in the empirical sciences. So each one of these team members, mashallah, has been either through a madrasa system or has studied traditional Islamic sciences in some form or fashion. And in addition, they also have been to college and university, and so they're familiar with each of these systems. And they also have a particular specialization. For example, some of our team members has a specialization in learning the Arabic language and fluency in the Arabic language. Maulana Bilal, mashallah, his background is in the theory of education and unity of knowledge, as well as how to integrate the sciences, the natural sciences, with the Islamic sciences. So very briefly, mashallah, Maulana Bilal studied at the University of Illinois Champaign engineering. He also has a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and adult learning from National Louis University. His madrasa studies are from Dar al-Uloom Karachi, as well as specializing in hadith in one of the great hadith scholars, Maulana Abdul Halim Nu'mani. He's currently a lecturer and department head at Dar al-Qasim. as well as a board member here at Mashallah Uthman. Mashallah, Sheikh Zahid Chaudhry also has an engineering degree from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and he studied with a very famous great scholar who was very successful implementing an Arabic fluency curriculum in Bangladesh, Maulana Abu Tahir Misbah. And mashallah, after returning to the United States after his traditional Islamic studies, he has been engaged in these programs to teach teenagers as well as adults Arabic fluency, mashallah. So that's his specialization. Sara Ali has a master's degree in education from National Louis University, also a degree in educational policy from the University of Chicago. Mashallah has taught English literature and Islamic foundation for many years. Also was a founding member of Al Ihsan Academy in Libertyville, and has also mashallah studied Quran and Tajweed in Syria. And then my own personal background, Talha, my name is Talha. I went to the Illinois Math and Science Academy, which had a very unique educational curriculum right here in Aurora. I did my engineering at Cornell University, and I also alhamdulillah, had the opportunity for many years, for about 9-10 years, to study the traditional Islamic sciences all the way to the book Al-Hidayah and the Hadith book Mishkat with Maulana Aziz Ahmed. I spent a lot of my time in the past several years working on our Maktab curriculum and the Hifz curriculum. So basically teaching Islamic studies and Quran from the very young age, from 5 years old till about 12, 13 years old. That's a lot of my experience and background. So again, the only reason that we're bringing all this up is just for you to see that all of these different areas of expertise have been brought on to bear in designing this unique curriculum and launching this project. With that, inshallah, I'll turn this over to Maulana Bilal to talk about our educational philosophy.
Just a quick announcement. If any of the sisters who just came in, they have children that they want to utilize a separate space, well, they can go to a separate room that they can be directed to, where they are broadcasting the same presentation. And with that, I want to get into the educational philosophy, but briefly. Educational philosophy, of course, is a very deep topic, and we could spend the entire 45 minutes on just one point. What I want to specifically address today, especially for those who are interested in the K-3 program, is the idea that the Islamic conception of knowledge is an integrated one. It is harmonious with our concept of the universe, and it comes from the universality of our viewpoint of all existence. Any civilization, it shares three concepts: its ontology, its epistemology, and its methodologies. When we talk about an Islamic school, we're not just talking about a particular methodology of teaching Islam in the classroom. We're talking about a shared concept of existence, of the physical, metaphysical world. We're talking about introducing children to a shared epistemology. How do we know anything to be true? What is the balance between empirical claims of natural science as opposed to revelatory claims through wahi? And then also our methodology should be universal and integrated. The problem is that for much of the Muslim world, the last 200 years have resulted in this bifurcation of the sciences, this conflict theory of knowledge, that there's science versus religion, right? There's the secular versus the sacred. Muslims didn't traditionally have that sort of hiccup in understanding the nature of knowledge. We had what we might call a tawhidic epistemology, a tawhidic conception of knowledge. Everything emerges from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the diagram that you have here demonstrates how we recognize that وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, right? Or عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ مَا لَمْ يَعْلَمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the source of all knowledge. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above all people or possessors of knowledge is the all-knowledgeable. If we really believe that as Muslims, that Allah is al-Alim and all knowledge emerges from Allah, then we cannot accept a concept of a bifurcation or dichotomy of knowledge. What we do have in the Islamic epistemological system, or our theory of knowledge, is three concepts, or key epistemological principles. And I'm just going to briefly cover them. Number one is that we believe that there's a unity of knowledge. Right, and we want children who are growing up in this part of the world and who have access to the resources that we have access to really appreciate that there is a unity of knowledge. We don't have to have like multiple hats. You have the hat that you wear at work, and then you have the hat that you wear, the topi you wear at the masjid, right? That you have like this conflict within you in terms of your knowledge sources and how you apply them. All knowledge comes from the unified source. And then number two, that there's a harmony of knowledge. That said, the third key epistemological principle is that there is a hierarchy of knowledge. So in education, we have to appreciate how do you take certain sciences and organize them in a way that we appreciate that there is no conflict, but there is a hierarchy. There is a ranking system, right? Like the queen or the king of the sciences is a theology. The sacred sciences are given precedence, but you must inform students in their educational path through what we call the instrumental sciences, grammar, rhetoric, right? Logic. And this is traditionally how Islam was always taught. It was taught alongside with this understanding that, fiqh cannot be taught without social sciences, right? There was a famous statement of Imam Muhammad, rahimahullah ta'ala, that "Man lam ya'rif ahla zamanihi fahuwa jahil." To the fuqaha, he said, the one who doesn't know the customs of his time, you might call it the social science, he's jahil, he's ignorant. That person cannot function as a faqih who represents Quran and Hadith. So this idea, if you look at how we kind of organize it on the left side, revealed knowledge versus the naturally acquired knowledge, we don't look at these as in conflict with one another. We look at these as all emerging from the same essence from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The basic principle that is that if we believe in this unity and harmony and hierarchy of knowledge, the system should be universal because the universal produces that which is universal. The universal produces that which is universal. So the theory is that from unicity, from the unified or this tawhidic idea, you get multiplicity. And that's sort of the metaphor that we're using of like a tree of knowledge, that the plant, if the seed of this plant is Iman, and if we teach children how that essentially is one organism, when it manifests in the form of our action, then we recognize that all of these sciences sort of are part of the same tree. If you have a tree that only has some sciences, it'll be lopsided. It's still a tree, but it won't be completely, it won't be beautiful. It won't have that ihsan that we desire in our education system. So, I mean, we can get into some of the specifics of this if you're interested, but because today we're focusing on K-3, maybe I'll just talk a little about how, if you look at math, science, language, and history, in the K-3 program, we're going to be, or actually grammar, we're going to be focusing on classically what Muslims used to focus on in the beginning of the education system, and what now unfortunately has been lost because of this progressive, wayward educational theory of transferring everything and outsourcing it to AI and to Khan Saab, right, Khan Academy. We have a kind of an idea that we need to draw an inspiration from our traditional Islamic curricula and go back to the foundations of strong grammar, right, strong study of logic and rhetoric, and these foundational sciences, and build off of them. And that also will reinforce the study of revelation. With that, inshallah, I think I'm going to hand off the mic to Mawlana Zahid.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So knowledge is excellent, but the mere acquisition of knowledge is not enough. We need to also have Islamic character and adab as part of a holistic person. Because the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned, "Innama bu'ithtu li'utammima salih al-akhlaq," that indeed I've only been sent to perfect noble character. So that is part and parcel of Islamic personality. It's been mentioned about one saying that "ilmun bila adabin kanarin bila hatab," that if you have knowledge but you don't have any adab, akhlaq, character, then it's like fire without any wood. So both of these parts will be essential, right, as we are trying to grow the child in a holistic way. So adab and akhlaq will be essential part of our effort. And inshallah, I mean, the best role model is the Prophet ﷺ himself, and we try our best to embody that akhlaq. And to follow him is part of our iman, and to manifest that is part of our iman. So we have looked at what type of characteristics that we can learn. So these things are generally acquired at home. They're acquired by seeing. You don't really teach them. So part of it is like, what are some activities that we can do so that we can inculcate this type of akhlaq and adab in our students. So first we try to identify some of the main characteristics that we want to develop. So it's listed up there. Obviously, connection to Allah, taqwa, having ikhlas, sincerity, humility, being ready to serve, being able to do khidmah, as well as being generous, sharing, kindness, timeliness. To have these type of characteristics, perseverance and grit. Go through any difficult situation, you have that energy to go through. So these are some of the ideas that we want to develop in the child, but that's through practical, right? So we're looking at some practical steps that we can do inside the class, outside the class. First thing would be to have positive role models, and the teachers and the staff, they will be that very first role model. That how do we want to demonstrate Islamic personality? That will be there. In addition to that, we'll have different types of activities. Here has been mentioned some of them. For example, the prayer will be a foundational piece. Sometimes, we see that there's theory about salah, it's very important, but then when the practicality comes, then we don't get enough time for it. So then that sends a mixed signal to the student that you're saying prayer is important, you're memorizing all the fara'id, but then when it comes to prayer, it's not there. So as an organization, we have that as one of our goals, that they should not see that they should see it's holistic, that I'm learning about prayer, I'm also acting upon the prayer. I'm learning about dhikr, I'm also practicing the dhikr. I'm also seeing my teachers do that. I'm seeing the other students do that. So that environment is there. Some of the other aspects, narrating stories from the Prophet's Sahaba. So these things are there so to teach us akhlaq, and different scenes from the seerah, different scenes from our salaf. Even good literature has a lot of good morality, good content where we can learn how to go through and develop these types of skills. So that will be taught. Communal meals in the style of sunnah. So we also try to our best at sometimes to introduce the idea of sitting down, eating the sunnahs, eating with the right hand, all the a'mal that we learn, to try to practice that. So at times we will also have that, inshallah. And then there will be some type of khidmah activities where they will also play a role in trying to serve others, right? So that even in the meals, maybe somebody will be responsible for serving. So these type of things that we want to create. So then there is no dichotomy here that I only know something and I let somebody else do the action. So the child will be, inshallah, there. And the parents, we also request that this is something that you do at home as well, right? So part of that will come a little bit later, that what we will expect from the parents as well. So akhlaq is going to be there. And the last point here, avoiding social media culture, like creating limited screen environment. So that will be also addressed a little bit later, but that's something that we realize that is detrimental to akhlaq. So we're trying to do those things that are going to enhance the akhlaq and adab and the Islamic personality. At the same time, we want to remove those things that will make us ghafil about that. And number one is the screens. And we all know that. So we'll try our best and we'll, with wisdom, try to inculcate this screen-free environment in the school. And we also would like, the parents to do that. Inshallah, we'll talk about that as a separate slide as well. So inshallah, now we will go into a little bit more about the classical methods.
So our third core philosophical principle is that classical methods provide a stronger foundation. The classical method of education is very different and very distinct from modern trends in public schools and private schools today. But the word classical can mean different things to different people. Are we talking about Western classical, Islamic classical, neoclassical, Charlotte Mason style classical? So it's important to define this term very clearly. Here at Sirat, we believe, when we say classical education, that it should include the following components. Everything that has been discussed so far. And then in addition to that, number one, that there are objective truths out there. There is a haqq, and that these absolute truths can be discovered through studying Revelation, math, science, literature, all these different subjects. This is opposed to, moral subjectivity, moral relativism, this idea that, we can determine our own identity, our own gender even. So material at Sirat will be taught from this perspective. Number two, the apprenticeship model of education is perhaps the most successful model of education based on the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahaba as a master trained his apprentices. And so that relationship between teacher and student is the most important part of an education. The teacher is the curriculum, not the book. Islamically, in our tradition, the true education has always come from the relationship that the student has had with his teacher. So, this is something that, inshallah, we intend to focus on here, making the teacher the master of content and character so that the student can emulate that in that mentorship relationship. Number three, curriculum should be content rich, which means that we provide children with an abundant and systematic knowledge of the world through science and social studies, rich vocabulary, and therefore science and social studies should not be relegated to once or twice a week, but should actually be a regular part of the daily curriculum. Number four, students should have exposure to the great books, not only the great books of the Western civilization, but also of Islamic tradition and Islamic civilization. And this is important because the way that we can have a conversation with the great thinkers of the past is directly through their own words, it's through their books. And in reading those books, we can acquire the wisdom of collective centuries. Another core component of the classical method is studying a classical language. So here at Sirat, that would be Arabic. And in learning fluency in Arabic, students acquire the ability to interact with the great books directly and ideally in the original language so that they can tap into that tradition themselves and not through an intermediary or a translator. And then finally, the last key component of the classical model is the trivium. So this, as you can see from the graphic, has to do with studying, beginning with grammar, which is knowledge, the study of knowledge, essentially using memorization, repetition, just constant exposure to create a strong set of data and knowledge in the child's mind. And then transitioning to logic, which is, how do the facts fit together? And how do we analyze or think about this knowledge critically? And then finally, as the child gets older and is developmentally mature, moving into the rhetoric stage, how do you now command this language? How do you command your thought and use it to persuade and articulate your ideas eloquently? Once you have trained a child in these three subjects, they have acquired the essential tools of learning, and they have now learned how to learn and are able to tackle any subject on their own. So often in the modern age, we have children who are unable to read and analyze and think critically. The evidence of it is all around us. Think politics, think social media. And so, essentially when you can teach a child how to think properly, you can make them immune to the false aspects of a culture today. Another core principle of our philosophy is that education must instill a love of learning. It must open children they must open their eyes to the wonder and beauty in creation. So if I were to tell you that underneath the sea lives a colossal giant, it sees with its nose, it sings songs underwater, its heart is the size of a small car, and a child can crawl through its arteries, what would you say? You said, that's not true, that's rubbish. Well, that stuff happens only in fairy tales. But it is true. I'm describing to you a blue whale, but just using a different mode of knowing. Allah has created this world in beauty and mystery and wonder. Plants drink light. You could say plants drink light, or you could say plants absorb light and use the process of photosynthesis to, et cetera, et cetera. But, and that is an absolutely accurate way to describe the world. But there are more than one way, there is more than one way to know. Plants drink light, light turns into sugar. Did you know that there are waterfalls and lakes under the ocean itself? Allah created the world to be a magical and miraculous place. And if we can teach children that the world is a place that reveals His majesty and His beauty, it allows them a deeper access into the knowledge that we're trying to teach them. There's an ayah in the Quran, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of night and day, there are signs for men of understanding. So we don't teach children knowledge just to feed their intellects or to get them into a good college or to get them a good career. We teach them so that they can know their Lord, so that they can understand these signs and draw nearer to their Creator. So education must awaken wonder and beauty in the creation. It must involve a loving mentorship, which we discussed earlier. In the Quran, Allah says about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is from Allah's mercy that you were soft with them. Had you been rude and harsh-hearted, they would have left you. So again, placing an emphasis on the relationship between teacher and child. And then finally, using narratives and stories, the best kind of stories, to teach children. The Quran itself is full of stories, and Allah says in there, we relate unto you the best of stories through our revelations unto you of this Quran. Before it, you were unaware. If an education can include all three of these components, you have created a lifelong thirst for learning in a child that will continue even after they leave the school building. And this will allow them to build a relationship with Allah that springs not just from their mind and head, but also from their heart.
Okay. So now I just want to talk a little about expand on one of the points that was mentioned by Mona Zahid, in that our understanding of development of the universal man. The idea is that we want to produce children that are able to be universal in nature. We call this in the Arabic tradition that Insan Kamil. The Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam represented the universal perfect man. That includes not just the acquisition of information, but also the development of them spiritually, mentally, their mental health, etc. One of the new trends that we're observing in the education space is the use of technology and screens in particular in the classroom setting. And this has increased exponentially over the last few years, even to the extent that now the conversation has become that we need to outsource knowledge to technology before it's too late, because it's going to happen anyway. So just like there's like this race to develop AI technologies without really thinking about the consequences, we're thinking about them, but not at the pace with which we're developing the technologies. Similarly, this is drastically affecting the education space. When we say screen-free, I don't know if we use the term screen-free, but we're not actually talking about creating Luddites who are not familiar with technology. We want children not to be dependent on the technology and be negatively influenced without reflection and deliberation on the uses of these technologies. I know that, personally, I've seen this now, that this dependence on using screens for homework, for writing essays, has even impacted basic functioning. Writing skills, cursive has been more or less omitted in some public school systems. And research has shown that this is actually negatively impacting the child's educational development. There was research done, I think it was at UCLA, and I want to say Stanford or Princeton, that observed just the difference between writing on screens and writing using your hand, and how that actually impacts memory and retention of information. Because there's a certain process that you go through when you write, or you take notes and that can't be replicated. When you write it on a screen and then all of a sudden you press a button and it's disappeared. Right? There's a certain engagement of all your senses when you write something on paper, even if you're doodling on a piece of paper. And so there's a lot of research that is actually proving that we need to be very deliberate when it comes to the use of technology in the classroom. So one of the things that we're deeply concerned about is attention deficiency amongst children, how that's impacting their memories, how it's impacting reading comprehension, the joy of learning, distractibility, right? Which prevents deep work. This idea psychologically that you always have noise, whether it be through social media and phone technologies and iPads, children don't have a time to reflect. Now, even, the spaces that were very private, the restroom, that's occupied with noise. So people don't think anymore. They don't have time to reflect and sort of detox and just kind of think about things, look out the window and reflect on things. So this is also impacted deep thinking, right, and imagination. And then, of course, social skills. We're seeing that a lot of social interaction has now become in that technology space, and it's impacting like mental health. The relationships that we want people to develop with their teachers and with their classmates is being impacted. So we're not trying to avoid absolutely technology such that our children are going through the system and not being aware of new trends, and they're unfamiliar with basic skills like typing now. It's a modern skill, and they won't be able to go into certain science. Rather, what we want to emphasize is that the overuse of technology will actually adversely impact students' test scores. And we are trying to develop thinkers here, not just like clerks, people who are very proficient at typing and coding, but maybe aren't reflecting on the purpose of all of it. And this is some data that you can look at. Oh, sorry. So some of this data does demonstrate how when you give students a laptop, right, how it knocks off half a letter grade. Actually, it's really interesting just to share one anecdote. I had a teacher in high school who was also my older brother and older sister's teacher, Mr. Kek from IMSA, and he used our class in high school to experiment with like a lab setting where everybody sat in front of a computer. And I believe that 2 years after he started that experiment, he gave it up because everybody was facing the computer and doing their homework and doing all their assignments on the computer. This was like in 1996, right? So this was a while ago. And he quickly gave up. After 2 years, then he changed the setting and recognized that actually, even though there were some advantages, overall, most of the students were on the internet and like searching up, NFL scores and things like that, as opposed to actually concentrating and focusing on their math. So the grades were also impacted. And the students that were actually performing very well the previous year, their grades were negatively impacted by the use of technology in the classroom. So we are advocating for some use of technology, what we call a thoughtful use of technology in the elementary years. But we hope that parents can understand why we would advocate for the following rules. One would be that we are, wanting the classroom and the school to be more or less, screen-free or phone-free. So smartphone devices in the building, where we are hoping that people will either not send them with their children, or if they have to for various reasons, that they're left under the school supervision. We hope to also to get parent cooperation with minimizing screen time at home. And education is not just in the classroom. We don't again want to sort of outsource education to one space, which is the school. We want to also have education continue at home and in a masjid space, etc. So we want parents to cooperate with creating a schedule for the use of screens if necessary or at all during the child's time at home. And we are going to be focusing on paper-based textbooks, readings and assignments, using your hands, reading handouts and physical copies of books. But then we also will hope that students may learn to use the technology for specific applications, just as it has been used in the past, but not, I think, with the degree of overuse that we're experiencing today. For more information on this is a vast topic. We have emphasized it because it's a deeply troubling topic. I think a lot of parents share these sentiments and these concerns, but there's a lot to it. If you are interested in more about how technology is affecting the mind, these are some recommended readings. Deep Work, The Shallows by Nicholas Carr is actually one of the first books I read on this topic. Screen School and the Anxious Generation. This one's actually quite interesting because it speaks to the epidemic of mental illness that, as someone who's also in the field of counseling, and I know some of our chaplains, mashallah, people who work in this space are experiencing this a lot, that the technology is dramatically affecting mental health. Oh yeah, and then, so I talked about this briefly, but we do believe that actually the primary educator is the family. And as they say, the first madrasa is the life of the mother. So we want to have this cohesive relationship between the institution, the teachers, and also the parents. And we do believe that the parents are the primary educators. One of the challenges we see in a lot of these traditional schooling systems is that in order to take advantage of these situations, you have to have like a dorming facility, and the parents are completely separated from the children during their transformative years. We don't believe that actually you should outsource ta'deeb, the teaching of adab, and the culture of the home to someone who doesn't have that investment as much as the parent does. So the parent's involvement is absolutely key. And we're hoping that the parents will be willing to also participate not only in the classroom, but also, not only at home, but also in the classroom. In the sense that as much, volunteering or involvement in the program, communication with the parents, so they're aware of what they're doing in the classroom and they're able to assist outside of the classroom. Parent education workshops, even if they're not mandated, we want the culture of participation where the parents are invested in the schooling and they're not sort of dumping their children into the school to take care of them and not be involved. So some of the activities that we plan outside of school are, tarbiyah lessons that will be more for like community programs. We will encourage the attending of the masjid. Now, mashallah, we have now multiple buildings, the Masjid Uthman space, multiple spaces will be offering multiple types of programs. We're trying to build a community here. And if you look at the history of Islam and Islamic education, we recognize that education actually emerged initially from the masjid. And then due to logistical needs, that expanded outside the masjid space into the madrasa, or colleges and schools, local masjid, larger masjids. But really, the masjid is critical to the intellectual and moral education of the child. And then daily parental efforts in cultivating literacy at home. We do believe that the parents also need to participate in that education to appreciate what the kids are learning. So, for example, reading a hadith at home on a regular basis with the children, with the parents, talking about what those hadith and how they can be implemented in our lives, and then continuing that conversation in the classroom. So the parents are probably, the teachers are talking about the same lessons with the children, but maybe they read those hadith also at home, right? And then, activities like on the weekends where this isn't just sort of recreation, but part and integrated into the schooling system, like nature walks, right? Exploration and discovery outside of the classroom. We are hoping that these activities will be integrated into the schooling. Extracurricular service projects for families also to participate in throughout the year. The advantage of this with the parents or for the parents is that you are more intimately aware of like the system and the philosophy of the school. It's not so because we want to, use you for free labor, right? We need someone to be in the parking lot, and no, we actually want you to be involved so you know how the system is working, and so you can complement that philosophy of education at home.
Jazakumullah khair. So these were our main contentions related to educational philosophy. Inshallah, now we'll jump to another session, the curriculum. So what are we actually offering and how does it look year by year? Inshallah, I'll kick this off by describing the curriculum from a broad perspective. As you can see, our focus this year obviously will be K through 3, but we have thought about what we offer and what our ultimate objectives are up till the 12th grade. And I know some of you are looking at this, trying to read it. Inshallah, a lot of this material over the next couple of days or weeks, we are going to put on our website as well, so you can take a look at it in more detail. And we'll go through this in a bit more detail in the next few slides as well. But what you'll see here, what's some of the highlights are that we are, offering all the traditional subjects that you would expect at a school and in a very rigorous curriculum. So we have English and language arts, English literature, social studies, and then math, fine and common arts. So the finer arts are the aesthetics and common arts are more related to the hand, practical arts, and then physical education as well. But along with that, as part of our philosophy, we do offer a very rigorous curriculum in Arabic, and inshallah, Mawlana Zahid will talk about that in more detail. But by the very end, in the 12th grade, the students are actually understanding Arabic grammar, Arabic morphology, as well as reading technical books and Arabic literature. When it comes to social studies, we really integrated, world history, American and U.S. history, which is part of the high school requirements, with the Sirah and the stories of the prophets and ancient civilizations, and connecting, for example, the story of the stories of Musa alayhi salam and Ibrahim alayhi salam with ancient civilizations that they were in, as well as towards the end, looking at Muslim history in quite detail. So who were some of the great people who were the Mujaddideen of the time? You'll see at the very end, there's the book Rijal al-Fikr wa Da'wah. This is a detailed biographies of great Muslims of the past and what revivalist movements that they led during their times. Under Quran and Hadith, we start with Qaida, reading Alif Bata, memorizing surahs, learning Tajweed. Eventually, we give a few years to more intensive memorization, but along with that, continuing with their education in English and math and Arabic. And then after that, then we're actually getting into reading the Quran and some very basic tafsir, along with some basic study of Hadith in the Arabic language. You'll see a lot of our books here, they're written in Arabic. So that the intention of that is those subjects are actually offered in the Arabic medium. So students are reading Arabic texts, conversing in Arabic. And then when it comes to beliefs and practice, in the first few years, covering all the basic 5 pillars of Islam, but then proceeding on to reading books in Arabic, in fiqh, in aqaid, and even getting into, as we talked about earlier, what are the principles of hadith? How did the science of hadith develop? What is the principles of fiqh? How did that develop? So when students go on to college, they have a very strong understanding of their intellectual tradition. And then, of course, science and math. Inshallah, we'll go into more detail on each of those in the next few slides.
There's a basic assumption, when someone sends their child to a Islamic school, that they'll learn the 3 A's, and what I call the 3 A's. One is that have the correct aqidah or aqaid, the correct beliefs. One is that they will have akhlaq, right, of a Muslim, and then third, they'll learn Arabic. Right, this is kind of a basic expectation that all parents have, but unfortunately, we've seen that it hasn't been the case for multiple reasons. But that's something that we'd want to have in Islamic school. So if you're not in Islamic school, what do? You outsource it to the Maktab program, Sunday school, after school, all these different programs. So this is what we have at Masjid Usman already, where we have these various programs. Now imagine if all of that could just be integrated into the daytime, right? So many of you are already aware of the system and the growth that we've had in these different programs. But I remember one time when I was offering something in Bangladesh, there was, in my area, there wasn't any program. So the regular kids were just in regular public school, and then there was no additional, what do we call, like a maktab or anything. So we introduced this system called holiday school, where they would have class basically on Friday and Saturday because it was the days off. So when we first started doing that, then I remember one child, she goes back to her father and it's like, Baba, I want holiday school every day. I want holiday school every day. So I was really impressed because, I didn't know it would have that much of an impact. So we see that sometimes like these type of programs, they are major changes in the life of a student. I mean, if you look back to my generation and you see like who are the ones that are actually doing something now in the community, you'll trace it back to MCC Sunday School. Sunday school graduate. This is who I am, and who many of the other initial people that are working in the community, because that's what we had. But wouldn't we wish when we were in there that we could do it more than just Sunday? So we didn't have the opportunity. Brother Talha mentioned like we didn't have this opportunity what we were trying to offer now when we were younger. But definitely that will be the case. Even though we have now a maktab that's developed, we're having the after school program maktab, right? We have the Sunday school, we have summer programs. We haven't had the Quran Rehla, right? This 1-year program now where you can immerse yourself and learn the Arabic and the Quran. What if that's integrated into our day-to-day? And so all of the programs that you've seen at Masjid Usman, now that will be the base for our school at Sirat. base for the programs that we have at Sirat. So all of those things will just be the foundation. And a lot of the times when you're at different places, you see that the Quran is as a problematic. You have to outsource the Quran. So one of the reasons that some schools are not successful because they cannot provide a strong Quranic education. Alhamdulillah, we already have practice in that. As you see, the maktab has been growing. We have great teachers in that. Same thing with the Arabic. Alhamdulillah, the Rihla, we have very qualified staff already there. So we've been used to offering programs to the community. So now we would like to extend that by having it on a daily basis. And when you can do that, now we can go further. So you can go further. So instead of waiting to finish school and then do a 1-year program, so that 1-year program, all the content will be covered maybe by 7th grade, 8th grade. If that's the case and the student knows Arabic, then what can they do? Now, a lot of the things that are in the Alim program that people have to devote 5, 6, 7 years, that will already come into the program by high school. So that's it. That's the intent, inshallah. So we have this idea that people will go through different tracks. First with the Quran, the Nazara is there. Then you're going to understand. Then there'll be some hifz and memorization. Finally, going into some tarjama and some tafsir. So that'll be extended through the system as the students go from class to class, year to year. Now you can imagine that Islamic studies. What do we do in maktab? That's just the beginning with the English. Once they have a strong foundation in Arabic, a lot of these subjects can be taught in the original Arabic. So imagine the fiqh book that you're doing in English, you can have the same fiqh book taught again in Arabic. So you get the Arabic and you get a closer terminology, closer to the language of the scholars. So that's what we would envision in our program. And then as we mentioned about the social sciences and the social science and science in general, things that are completely not in the spectrum of Islamic education. But now it will be. Because science, as we've already heard, we're going to look at from the view of wonder, from the fact that these are all signs of Allah Ta'ala. And so all of the curriculum will be holistic and it'll be from the base. So inshallah, from the beginning. So as we develop it further and further, inshallah, by that time the child is past 8th grade or into high school, they'll have a lot of these skills, inshallah. And that's our hope and that's our desire. And I feel that inshallah, we have a good team. We already have the necessary expertise for that. It's something if you're claiming Quran fluency and Arabic fluency, if you don't have the staff, you don't have the vision for that, you haven't implemented programs. But alhamdulillah, if you look at the Rihla program, you look at the Maktab program, that's already there. So alhamdulillah, we'll use many of those things into the system at Sirat to offer this simultaneously with the regular studies. Now, just because we're able to offer that, I mean, that's what you would find in a typical madrasa. But what's different is that we're also getting the input from the contemporary knowledge, right? So that means we have to be able to understand English, right, properly, to understand how to communicate, how to critically think about that, how to also articulate ourselves in the environment. So that's where it's also going to be a difference here, because we also have equal importance on those type of topics as well. So our English and math literacy, that will be a major component, because one thing, okay, mashallah, you learn Arabic, you learned all the subjects in Arabic, but can you communicate that with the people around you? Can you articulate your thoughts? So that is something that sometimes we're lacking, because we're not having that level of English proficiency to read critically ideas, to think about it, to ruminate on that, and then give a counter reply or just even explain it. Right? So that's going to be, it's a simultaneous effort. It's not just, okay, you're going to come out and learn Arabic and speak Arabic. You're going to also be able to adjust and speak in the language of the people, which is English. So for that, we're also going to focus on the English and math, and then that'll be the subject of the next slides, inshallah, talking about that.
So in terms of the math curriculum, and in terms of actually the entire curriculum, you see the curriculum map. Our team has actually spent a couple months researching not just philosophy, but also various resources out there. And so in terms of the math curriculum, we're still in the process of finalizing which resources we'll be using. But our top contenders are Eureka Math and Singapore Math Dimensions. And what's great about both of these curriculum, they're both very strong programs, and they both are essentially founded on the same principles. Many years ago, the Singapore government conducted a very vast and extensive study of the top performing countries in the world. And the team essentially distilled all the best practices of these countries and their curriculum, and then came back home and designed a curriculum that was essentially a compilation of all of these best practices. And ever since then, some of you may actually even be familiar with this, Singapore's students are top performers on international assessments in the realms of math and science. In 2023, actually, I think they placed number one. So Singapore math is actually the original curriculum that a lot of schools here and curriculum here in the US have adopted from. And Eureka is essentially an evolution of a curriculum called Engage New York. They are now actually being used in the Naperville school districts, I believe. But they use a lot of the same things that Singapore math does. Their common elements are, one, they're both based on the concrete pictorial abstract model, or the CPA model. So you start by explaining a math concept to students using concrete manipulatives. Then you move on to using pictures in a book. And then finally, you move to the point where students can abstractly represent that either through equations or other, symbols. They're both also essentially based on a mastery approach to math. They don't necessarily spiral, but they are mastery. And they believe very strongly in providing students with a conceptual understanding of math, not just how to do a problem, but why you do it that way. And again, you'll notice in public schools now, a lot of these curriculum are using elements of the original Singapore math. One thing that we did want to add to this at Sirat is a strong foundation in math fluency and mental math. For those of you, or for those of us who were schooled here in the 80s, there was a lot of emphasis on memorizing your math addition facts, your subtraction facts, your multiplication table. And I think we've all noticed that has really declined in modern schools because there's almost a stigma associated with rote memorization. We are not afraid of rote memorization. You have to know facts and skills in order to think creatively. How can you think creatively when you don't know anything? So we do intend to add a supplementary part of the curriculum. We intend to add a supplementary, portion to the curriculum in addition to Eureka or Singapore that will incorporate daily practice of math facts. You can see here, for instance, in the Detroit Public Schools Community District, just after 1 year of implementing Eureka Math, how much math scores went up. This is just 1 year. We have additional research with Singapore math as well in the appendix here in our presentation, but we thought we would just provide some evidence here of the effect that this curriculum can have on student understanding in math. The other critical element to our curriculum is literacy. So the word has always been an important part of our tradition from the beginning of the Revelation on. And so we intend to make it a central component of our curriculum as well. The curriculum that we are choosing between will all be based on the science of reading movement. So we will be providing explicit phonics instruction and also focusing on content knowledge in English as well, enhancing children's vocabulary, making sure that they are using elevated vocabulary. Another component of our literacy program will be frequent read alouds. We are curating a list of not only good quality books and literature, but also literature that is ideal for moral and virtue formation. So not just any kind of book that you would pick up in the library today, but something that is thoughtful and deliberate in terms of the kind of stories that you're presenting. And, this would not just be in the elementary grades. It would continue into middle school and high school as well. The function of a read aloud is to create a communal reading experience, but also children often cannot read as well as they can understand orally. So if you're surrounding them with a lot of language and high level vocabulary that they're not necessarily able to decode on a page, but you as an adult are reading it out loud to them, you are providing an opportunity for them to increase their vocabulary comprehension. You're also giving them the opportunity to listen to an adult read something that conveys the tone and the expression that is intended to be in that piece of writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. So overall, the read aloud is important. I think a lot of us think that it's something that should just be done when the children are little, but in fact, even in the high school, it provides tremendous benefit. We also believe in a renewed emphasis on writing, starting at the sentence level and then writing across disciplines. I cannot tell you how many times I was disturbed to see papers coming back from my children's school with not just spelling mistakes, but lack of punctuation and capitalization and no markings from the teacher to correct them. I do think that there has been a move towards letting children express themselves and be creative and journal, and in the hopes that the more you let them write, the better they'll get. But test scores have shown that that is not working. You're essentially letting children practice bad writing over and over again. And it's not our children's fault, it's the fault of the school. So this is something that we intend to focus on. Encourage our children to study grammar, to write well, and to therefore be able to write complexly. The research shows that you cannot think complex thoughts if you cannot express them. So if you can't write a complex idea, it means that your brain is not capable of thinking it. So writing is very, very important in developing a child's ability to think well. And then finally, we mentioned this earlier, technology has really sort of pushed out the emphasis on writing and penmanship in the classroom, but we do know that that embodied experience of writing is very important to the brain. And so we do intend to focus on handwriting and penmanship up until 4:30. I'm sorry. And so here's just a sample reading list of books that we would provide in the classroom, whether for children to read on their own or have read aloud to them. I think our personal preference will be the older the book, the better.
Jazakallah khair. So here we'll wrap up the curriculum section, inshallah, and proceed on to operational details. So starting off with the facility, alhamdulillah, you're all in our new facility, which we acquired, alhamdulillah, in October. And we, mashallah, thank our community and our supporters for making the investment that we can have this and we can offer a program like we've just talked about in this new facility. We are actually in the process of renovating, and we're going to be renovating this facility stepwise. Right now, we're actually in the permit process to renovate the musalla on the first floor. After that, inshallah, we'll be renovating the second floor, which will become the ultimate home for Sirat. And we're also planning on renovating the other side of the first floor for a play area for the kids. So this first year will actually be more of a transition. If we're able to complete our renovations on the second floor, then inshallah Sirat School will run in the second floor. If not, there's a possibility that if we don't complete it in time, some portion of the year, maybe in this floor that you're in right now. There are plenty of rooms here. It's just they're a bit small, so we may have to do some very, very minor modifications in order to fit. But again, there'll be sufficient space, but there may be a transition period where there's some renovations going on. Some of you came and may have seen that we actually are already running classes in the first floor. We have homeschooling classes for the kids, for our HIFZ kids on Saturdays. So much that we have 3 or 4 classrooms that we're already operating downstairs. So we'll kind of be operating in that mode in this academic year. Again, our ideal is to be able to complete our renovations on the second floor, but that may not be possible. And so again, that'll be our transition. Ultimately, the goal, inshallah, is that we will have a library and a play area as well. And inshallah, over time, several other renovations, including the parking lot, will continue to do. What will the school look like? We talked about how we want to create a community and culture of shared goals. Just to give an example, one of the parents was mentioning to me that I have a lot of difficulty convincing my son or my daughter not to have a phone. And that's why, because they may not necessarily care for the phone themselves, but all of their friends have it. So if we have a culture where none of the students have it, then it's easier for us to implement those cultural practices at home as well. If all of our friends' parents are going to the masjid on a daily basis, it's easier to take our own sons to the masjid as well. Uh, Especially during the beginning, our class sizes will be limited. This is a way where we can really focus on the students, especially during the beginning, as we fine tune a lot of what we're doing. The goal right now is to have one homeroom teacher, at least between K and 3, not as much in the upper grades, but in K through 3, there will be one main homeroom teacher, but there may be additional teachers for specific subjects, such as Arabic or PE. So, for example, for Arabic, we would need a teacher that is fluent in Arabic and really get the students conversing and immersed in Arabic. And the reason that we want one single homeroom teacher is that homeroom teacher will be the one doing the tarbiyah of the students. So we talked about how tarbiyah is, starting from simple akhlaqi practices like saying salam properly, sitting down properly. So if we have one teacher guiding the students through that whole process, it'll make it easier with that one homeroom teacher. Classes will be 8:10 to 3:20. But keep in mind that, especially with all the material that we're going to be covering, we're adding a lot of intensive Islamic studies. Some of the later grades may go may go longer than this, but this is our plan for K through 3. And inshallah, we'll also have extracurriculars such as additional languages. One parent that we talked to 2 days ago said, "Can you please offer Urdu as well, or can you offer Spanish as well?" Athletics, and then various types of tarbiyah activities. So these are all additional material that we can cover through extracurriculars, inshallah, which we expect to be able to offer as much as we can over time. There's some really important expectations because there are some differences. So I want to make some of these expectations clear. Obviously, our goal, just as your goal for your children, is that we invest the maximum that we can in the growth of your child, in the overall growth of your child, in their tarbiyah, in their education, by providing a very rigorous and wondrous learning environment as best as we can. What do we need from the parents? We want the parents to support that school culture that we're trying to build at home. And we want the parents to spend time learning at home. So, for example, there may be books that you will read to them at home, while we have a books that we focus on in the school. And the other common theme that we've talked about is limiting screen use. This is something where we have expectations from the parents, and our expectation, inshallah, is that it's a joint culture that we develop. As I mentioned earlier, to cover a lot of the extensive material of the curriculum, later years may require more scheduled school time. So we need parents to be ready for that. And for children joining grades 1 through 3, there may be some bridge requirements prior to the school start to fill missing skills. For example, if your student is joining in 2nd grade or 3rd grade, obviously there was material in our curriculum in kindergarten and first that they may not have covered, or they may have covered, but there may be some gap in the skill. For example, Quran and Tajweed. And so as we assess your child through the application process, inshallah, we'll call out what those are, and we will, inshallah, provide some kind of remediation plan so that before they enter the school, they can at least make up some of that gap. Finally, be prepared for intensive character building. So we want the parents to be ready that if we assign certain khidmah duties to your children, that's something you're going to support. Right? This is part of our character building. Or, for example, if we have a day where all the students, they eat together from the same plate in the sunnah style, we need the parents to be with us on the same page. We can't have a situation where parents say, no, my kid shouldn't do this, or I don't want my kid to be doing this in the school. This is the kind of common culture that we want to be able to have in the school, because again, the school is not just learning knowledge, it's also building character. I won't go into too much detail in the application process because all of this information is very clear on our website. If you go to our website, sirat.org, sirat.org, inshallah, you'll find that information. But a few key elements I want to highlight is that the application process is open right now. MashaAllah, we've had a good number of applications come in already. The application process will end on March 3rd. So we ask all of you to submit your applications by that time. After that date, inshallah, we will do further assessments of the students. We may call you in as well, so we can discuss more detail with you, and then we'll make final decisions by early April, inshallah. I believe April 10th is the date. All the information on fees, on how the application process works is on the website, inshallah. If there are any parents that have difficulty from a financial perspective, we've structured our fees in a way that we can support the costs and have good teachers. But at the same time, if anybody has financial difficulty, there's also a financial aid process that we can go through. So our goal is that if mashallah, the parents are on the same page, you can implement the same culture at home. We want you to be part of the school, despite financial difficulties, if those exist. A little bit about admissions criteria. The primary criteria for admission is not academic performance. Rather, it's the parents' ability to invest in creating the environment that we want to create, the holistic student. So if you are on the same page with us on a low-tech approach, on creating a literacy-rich culture at home, cultivating a relationship with nature to understand nature, supporting the practice of Quran at home and attachment to the masjid, then this family would be an ideal candidate. And these are the things that we'll be looking for, inshallah, in our admissions process. And with that, inshallah, that was the last part that we had to present, inshallah. Is there anything else that we want to cover before we open it up for Q&A, inshallah? Okay, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Again, we appreciate all of you coming and attending, and we look forward to speaking further with you. But if there are any questions now, inshallah, we'll hand it off and we can address any questions. Inshallah, we'll give, let's see, it's 1 o'clock right now. So I think we'll give, inshallah, 20 to 30 minutes for questions, inshallah.
Let's start with the sister.